Hello and welcome to Smaulgld's People's Bank of China's gold reserve update for the month of March 2017. The People's Bank of China added no gold to her reserves in March. People's Bank of China added no gold to reserves in November 2016. They sold about 21 tons of gold in December 2016, and then they basically added back the 21 tons in February and January. And now in March, they've added no gold back. So since October, the People's Bank of China's gold reserve is flat. Now they have 1,842.6 tons, the same today that they had back in October. People's Bank of China's foreign reserves rose, though, for the second month in a row. They had slipped just below 3 trillion 2-3 months ago, and now they're slightly above. At one point last year, they had 4 trillion in reserves. So they have fallen 513 billion in 2015 and 320 billion in 2016. So they have sold off a tremendous amount of their foreign reserves, including U.S. Treasuries, while at the same time adding gold at the second fastest rate among central banks, second only to Russia. However, in the past 6 months, China, in the past 12 months really, China has really slowed its gold additions down. Now, when I say China, I don't mean the country of China. We're talking about the People's Bank of China. Before we go any further, that's something that I mention every time when we talk about the People's Bank of China's gold reserve. It doesn't mean all the gold that's in China. And I always say it doesn't take a genius to understand that if the People's Bank of China only has 1,843 tons of gold on its balance sheet, well, that obviously is not all the gold in China, because if we take a look at imports into Hong Kong, just Hong Kong, not including Shanghai, last year they imported 770 tons. Since 2001, they've brought in over 5,000 tons. If you take a look at their gold mining production, since 2000, they've mined 5,200 tons of gold that doesn't leave the country. So that's 10,000 tons right there that's been brought into the country and has been mined in the country. We're not including Shanghai gold, and we're not including gold that existed in the country before 2000. So of course, China, the country, has more gold than the People's Bank of China says. But the People's Bank of China never says this is the amount of gold China has. So when we talk about the People's Bank of China, that's why I say it's the People's Bank of China's gold reserves, not China's gold reserves. Because there is also, of that 10,000 tons that we can easily identify that got imported and that was mined in China, obviously it's elsewhere in the country. It's at other banks owned, remember it's a state-run operation, owned by the government of China, or there are even subsidiaries that are owned by the People's Bank of China. Other banks have gold on their balance sheets. Sovereign wealth funds that we don't have access to, they must have some gold. There's individuals that have gold. So obviously there's a lot more gold in China. So I wouldn't take I do take what the People's Bank of China says seriously. I don't think they're making it up or lying, because they're not saying this is the only gold that exists in China. They're saying this is what's on our balance sheet. This is what the IMF sees. And it's the same with their foreign reserves. I don't think they're making this up. I don't think they're making up that they have 3 trillion in foreign reserves, that they used to have 4 billion and now they have 3 trillion. I think they're reporting that accurately, and part of the foreign reserves that they put on the People's Bank of China is their gold reserves. So same with US Treasuries. This is not reported by China. This is reported by the United States Treasury Department, foreign holders of U.S. Treasuries, and they have indeed sold a couple of $100 billion worth of U.S. Treasuries over the past year, just as they've sold other assets that are part of their foreign reserves. But they've also added some gold. So that's what we have to look at, and that's why I report this every month. But I don't report it to look at it and say I don't believe them. See, a lot of people look at what the central banks report as somehow some type of big lie. And I don't think it is, because Germany, let's take a look at let's take a look at the supposed top 10 gold holding nations. Now, forget about the United States. I know the whole story that hasn't been audited in 50, 60 years. Let's just dispense with that. But the other countries, these numbers that they report, they haven't changed. They haven't changed in decades. Germany hasn't added any gold. They may have repatriated gold or supposedly repatriated gold, but this number hasn't changed for years. Italy, France, they haven't added or sold gold in years, decades. The only countries that are adding gold are China and Russia and Kazakhstan. Switzerland sold 60% of their gold. Japan hasn't added any gold. Netherlands hasn't added any gold. They may have repatriated their gold from the U.S. New York Fed, but they haven't added any. India, big gold nation, hasn't added any gold. If you go through the whole list of countries, their central banks, they mostly what's happened over the past 15, 20, 30 years are selling. Canada sold their gold. England, Bank of England sold their gold. So I don't think they're lying. They've put this number flat out and down, and they haven't changed that number in years. Now, it is possible that whatever gold these countries say they have, including the United States, that it's been lent, hypothecated, and so on. But I don't think they care that much. See, from a gold bug's perspective, it's as if the only thing countries care about are their gold reserves. And they play this 4D chess, and all they worry about is not telling the other side how much gold they have. I think for the most part, most of these central banks are so steeped generationally in fiat currency, they don't really think much about gold as much as maybe they should. I don't think they do, other than the Chinese, the Russians, the Kazakhs, the ones who are going to do trade in gold. I know Germany wanted to get its gold back because it didn't trust it being, elsewhere. They didn't really need the geographic diversification. But if Germany was so concerned about gold, why aren't they buying more? Why isn't Italy, France? Why aren't any of these countries adding more gold to the reserves? Again, the only ones that are adding, and really if China stopped adding, at least to the central bank in the last 6 months, the only ones adding are really Russia, and now we follow Kazakhstan. They add 4, 5, 6 tons a month. It's really Russia, the one that's adding the big numbers, and they are moving up, and they now have 16% of their foreign reserves in gold. So we can see that China, of course, has gold. There's plenty of demand for gold in China. It's just not making its way to the People's Bank of China's balance sheet. Foreign reserves are down. So it is kind of interesting that as the reserves go down, they're not selling off their gold. They're just not adding any. They're selling off the U.S. Treasuries, as you can see. But still, there's a very viable demand for gold in China. In February, they imported 50 tons. They're still mining 450 tons of gold a year. Shanghai Gold Exchange still doing 2,000 tons a year. We should have the Shanghai Gold Exchange numbers for March. February was the largest February ever. So there's clearly a lot of demand for gold in China. And they're not lying about, I don't think, about what's on the balance sheet of the People's Bank of China. They're just saying all this gold demand doesn't find its way to the People's Bank of China's balance sheet. And I think that's about it for the week. Not for the week, for the update. Since they didn't add anything, there's really little commentary other than what they're taking care of at the People's Bank of China is they're reestablishing their position with the yuan and their foreign reserves. And right now, they're just not adding gold to reserves. Thank you very much for listening.